Find some in your house. Don't throw it away. You can just send it my direction.
Okay.
I can't really eat it, so.
Don't normally have it.
And we're going to move forward in our direction here at the Bible Recap Podcast. Welcome back, everyone. That's Tyler. This is Queen Donzo. And I'm Josh. Yeah, of course, inside jokes, but of course, all good fun. We are week 34 of our podcast, and let me, of course, remind us of what we read today. And again, if you need to read, hit that pause button, and we'll see when you come back. So we continue and finish Jeremiah with chapters 41.
Only 2 pages left.
52. Yeah, that's right. I miscalculated. I told Don 28 weeks. It was actually 18.
Like, what?
We went backwards.
I want to keep you going a little further.
Well,
anyways.
all the time we take off, it'll probably be 28 weeks.
Yeah. All right. So we finished Jeremiah chapters 41 to 52. We read Lamentations chapters 1 to 5, and then we read the minor prophet Habakkuk chapters 1 to 3. And Tyler reminded us that it's Don's turn to kick us off.
Okay, so question number 1. Which of the 5 woes of Babylon is most tempting for you to put your hope in? Wealth, security, power, pleasure, or control? What emotions or desires are connected to that specific area that make it such an alluring thing to aim for?
At first, I was saying wealth and security, and then as I was thinking on it, I realized for me, wealth kind of plays into, once you have the wealth, kind of the rest starts falling into place. Falling into place is the word I want to use, but I think it comes with wealth. So I feel like that's always the one that one of my woes, I guess. I don't want to say idolize money, but it usually can make my life easier. But then I also can use my wealth to help other people. Mm-hmm. But I think, I just really, for me, it would be wealth out of all of them. But I think it's seeing people struggle that have no money, so it makes me want to make sure I don't have to struggle, I think is more of the reason why I have that emotion towards it. So, like, my grandma was struggled quite a bit, so it was seeing that, and not that it's a bad thing, but
She's probably happier.
she was pretty happy. So,
Well, not for the struggling part.
but no, it wasn't stuck on her mind, but she was also the first person to she'd give her shirt off her back if she had to. So it's taking those things, but also don't want to struggle. So still giving, but still trying to take the good out of that, but seeing the bad, I guess, too. I don't know. So.
For me, it was security. Security, control, all that good stuff. But I'm kind of one that's always thinks the grass is greener on the other side, and that people have it better, easier than I do. So security it is for me. That's my weak point.
For me, it was control. Life would be a lot easier if people would do what I want them to do. Yeah. Think how I think. Yeah. Prioritize how I prioritize. I think all of them are tempting in their own way, and in some aspects, I think we would all be tempted. But if I had to pick one, it would be this control. Just because trying to get to the outcome that I want is always nice. But that's where I've learned a lot in allowing other people to enjoy the journey of learning.
Yeah.
Even inside, I might be screaming.
Yeah.
Now we know.
Yes.
All right. Number 2. Why do you think the people of Judah don't believe Jeremiah and his prophecies even after Jerusalem falls like he prophesied?
I think I kind of alluded to this last week, but it's hard to listen to someone that isn't, not listen, but hard to believe someone that isn't telling you what you want to hear. Your first thing is to try to discredit them, even though he's proven to them why you should listen. Obviously predicted that exactly, but I think it's just hard to hear something sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in her book here too, and I kind of picked up on that, where also they thought their trouble started when they quit idolizing the Queen of Heaven.
Yeah.
So I feel like even though he was telling them the truth and it was going to happen, I think they felt like it was brought on because they didn't do their idolizing like they had in the past. So so then it was kind of more like he's telling them so, but I don't think they want him to have the upper hand. It's really what we did, or a lack of, didn't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Control. Security. I'm gonna use, I think the base word I want to get to is comfort, or to strive to at least be comfortable. Because as I was thinking about the prophecy, God's basically saying, hold tight. Don't try to find any comfort elsewhere. Just stick with it, and things will be good for you. I mean, God says things. There's going to be some blessing, and amidst this, all this disaster and this difficulty, but they sought the security, the familiarity, the comfort, trying to control their own circumstances. And so, as I thought about as a pastor, when I've seen people make decisions that I from my understanding, that kind of moves them away from what God has for them, it's because they've made a decision based on comfort or security, or something they perceive that, and of course, I don't know what, exactly, what God's told them, but just like, being comfortable isn't necessarily the promise or the guarantee from God. I mean, Jesus even says, there's going to be difficulty. Paul reminds us we're going to be going through hard times. Yeah. And so it wasn't surprising by any means for them to not believe Jeremiah. It's one of those frustrating things, and I think that's why Jeremiah is described as being the depressed prophet. Yeah, because they're like, we'll believe you whatever God says, and we're going to do it. Well, here's what he says. Well, adios. What he just said. Yeah. And of course, Jeremiah gets dragged along with him as well. Yeah. So, anyways, that's where I was at.
Yeah, he didn't have an easy one.
It's not.
Well, and that's where we've seen some of the frustrations of the other prophets, but then getting into Jeremiah's shoes, I mean, he was living the prophecy that Isaiah talked about a couple hundred years prior, and now he's there living it, and he's dealing with double-minded people, and of course having his life turned upside down. And so, I really feel for the guy.
Yeah. All right, question 3. It's easy to focus on God's destruction and think of him harshly in the final chapters of Jeremiah. But what unexpected mercies does he show towards his enemies and his people? What does this reveal of his character? One of the things she said in the book that I really caught on to, that kind of just kept rolling around when I was reading this, is that he is merciful. And what she's meaning by merciful is not giving what they deserve. And I started really kind of redefine my definition of merciful. Like, I know that's pretty much what the definition is, but in my head, I'm thinking of someone just being nice, but also like he's been wronged and still has not given them what they deserve. Like, and as a punishment, I should say.
The discipline.
And it kind of gives me hope for our world that he'll still continue to be merciful towards us even when we don't deserve it. So as sinners. So, and honestly, how he's given us, he's been merciful after thousands of years.
I was going to say, I think it's happening now
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Things could be a lot worse if he
Decided.
if we were disciplined or punished the way that we probably should be.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Which you kind of hate. That sounds wrong. I mean, you hate to think of God as our punisher, but
He's a parent. That's the way I think that's kind of what I've learned from most of this is God is, as a parent, giving us a very good example of what we need to do. And that's kind of the way I've started. We do call him the Father, God, Lord. He's giving us, he just doesn't write us off. So it's nice.
yeah. It was very similar to yours. I feel like his presence is always there with enemies and his people. And even in the enemies, he continues to kind of protect them or merciful to them, and always opens that door for them to still honor him and worship him.
Yeah.
He doesn't ever decline that or deny anybody. So I think that's one of the things that I feel like was very reveals about his character, is that nobody was going to be left out or left behind if they wanted to believe in him and follow him. He continued to open that door for them.
Yeah. So I thought long distance here. I don't know what the right word I'm looking for. 20,000 foot view. We'll use that. So I thought about Abraham and the covenant he makes with God, where when you think about covenant making, and of course with Abraham here, I'm using the example, but with any covenant, when you enter into covenant, basically you're basically saying that I deserve death if I break this covenant. And what I always think about when covenant going back to Abraham is that when they sacrificed the animals, it says they were cut in half, they were placed on two sides, and the blood ran in between. And then part of that ceremony is that both parties walk down, say, if I break the covenant, may this happen to me. But Scripture tells us that Moses fell asleep, and only God walked between. And so if the breaker of the covenant deserves death, yet God is always faithful. Now, and so when I think about the punishment here, and that Israel was warned. Remember when we were in the Exodus, Leviticus, when you mess up, what you deserve is total removal from the land, but you will be exiled, but I'm going to make a way for you to come back. There is a consequence. But I'm going to bring healing. I'm going to bring restoration. Not only am I going to give mercy, but there's going to be grace, giving you what you don't deserve. Yeah. Along with on the other side of the coin with mercy. And so what excites me is that what I'm learning in this is that we might experience the consequences, as we've talked about before, of our sin, but God makes a way for us to come back. Isaiah 30:20, though I may experience the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, your teachers will be hidden no more, and you'll hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it. And so now I think about my walk with Jesus, and whenever I goof up, mess up, or if I'm starting to stray, there's always those nudges. I'll refer to them that. Like, oh, I need you to tap back. Just like on a steering wheel in the car when you're kind of starting to drift. That brrrr, and it's like, oh, you got to get right back into the center part of the lane.
Get you back on your blinders.
And so, I think it is for some who aren't there yet, see God's punishment is like, oh, well, that's just rough. That's difficult. But if you look in the grand scheme of what God is trying to do and how he's handling his people, there has to be some type of consequence. But God is withholding final judgment because, again, Jesus is on the way. That's something greater that is for the good, not just for Israel, but for all people, is on the way. Well, I'll preach.
Yeah.
Number 4. Read Jeremiah 50:34 aloud. What aspects of God's character and his plan are revealed in this verse? How would you summarize it?
Do you want it or do you want me?
I'll take it.
Okay.
Yet their Redeemer is strong. The Lord Almighty is his name, and he is vigorous. He'll vigorously defend their cause, so that he may bring rest to their land, but the unrest to those who live in Babylon. Kind of what it shows of his character, kind of just says that he's still taking care of his people outside of the lands. It's not like, all right, you've lost the lands, bye. Like, I'm going to find someone else. No, he's still taking care of them. And that he's, going to punish the people who've done bad things to them. So with the Babylonians and taking care of Babylon. So, yeah.
I summarized it as he will speak for them. There will be rest to the earth and unrest to Babylon, and he will reclaim his children in righteousness. That's just kind of how I summarized the verse. But
I went down to 3 words. God is just. Israel, Judah, you get consequences, but I'm going to make a way back. Out of no way, there's going to be a way back. And of course, as we saw with the Assyrians, of course, now with the Babylonians, of course, later with the Persians, it's like, I'm using you to teach my people a lesson, but you are not off the hook.
Yeah.
Because you think of all the atrocities of the sins that they've committed. I mean, God uses them, and of course, like some of them know. Like Nebuchadnezzar's like, your Lord, your God, they sent me here to do this to you. But then God's like, but you've got problems too.
Yeah, you took it a little too far.
Like with the Syrians, Nahum's like, basically he was there saying, you know what, I used you, but you went too far. You are so bloodthirsty. Guess what? It's your turn. Yeah. Not only is it your turn, you do not get a way back because my people, what they represent, what they have, the law, the practice, that is what I want to, he's been trying to do into the world. These idols, that has to be dry erased, marker off the map. And so when you think about it in world history, as God now has declared judgment on Babylon, was, as God said, was basically wiped off the face of the earth. The city is just
there's
gone.
nothing. Yeah.
So, all right.
I was just going to say, I almost feel like 5 and 6 we just need to discuss together because it's discouraging and encouraging. Yeah. But
do we want to combine those? I'll read them both.
Yeah.
I think it'll be easier because we can just get it out of the way because they're the same question.
I'll read them both.
What's good and what's bad.
But I want to pause for this commercial break and point out that Dawn got a new Bible.
Yes.
She patted it earlier. Nice, bright shade of blue there. Oh, very cool. Turquoise. Turquoise. Blue, green.
Definitely a woman answer on that part.
Yes. I had more fun picking this out, too.
She had been talking about that, and she finally got it there. So, all right, back to our show.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to be reading 5 and 6 together. What was most troubling to you in the book of Jeremiah's prophecies and their fulfillment, and why? What was most encouraging or eye-opening to you in the book of Jeremiah, and why?
One of the things we've talked about before through the several weeks of reading Jeremiah was what was troubling for me when I put myself in there, like just the people's shoes, is who to believe. there was false prophets. There was people telling me to go one way that I'm guessing I would have trusted in the faith. And then I have Jeremiah telling me to go another way. Just, it would have been really confusing on which route to take, not to this extent, but I've, been there sometimes where you're getting told, not that either thing is bad, but you're getting told one thing, and then you're kind of getting told about 80 degrees different, or 90 degrees, I should say, different things. So like, what choice are you going to make? So I just think that would have been really hard and troubling to try to figure that out as the people, not to give them a pass, but for some of it, I think that's throughout all of this, that was kind of something that's stuck with me, but something that's encouraging, that even in God's anger, he still cares for our needs and cares for us, just in general. She talks about how God is slow to anger, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't get angry. And, but even when he's angry, he still takes care of his people, and does, you might get a punishment, but that's like what we said, he gives us a way to get back in. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to
I found that as the most encouraging too, is his acceptance and continued protection, even to his enemies, if they sought him. But I struggled a little bit with what was troubling to me, and I'm not sure why. But I think you could even go back to a little bit like what you said, when you're supposed to be trusting somebody that's prophesizing, but you can even take it back to COVID when we had Fauci telling us, but yet, do you really believe him? And it's just, I see so much of Jeremiah in today, because we could follow somebody who we think is telling us the truth. But it's just hard to know. Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
So I almost think it would have almost been easier to listen to Jeremiah than it is for us to listen today to people because we have so many opinions anymore.
Yeah. Yep. Silly democracy. Everyone gets a voice and vote.
Because there is a part of me that would just like to be told, but then I'm like, yeah, that isn't going to work for me either.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of what I felt like Fauci was doing. So then you have Jeremiah doing the same thing. So, it's difficult.
Yep.
So I guess that would be the troubling part is just, do you accept it? Do you listen to it? Do you believe in it? And the encouraging part is just that he continued to be there and just kept saying, even if you screw up, I'm your way back.
Yep. I think I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of what you just said on the troubling part. For me, what's troubling is that how quickly people were able to turn on Jeremiah, even after successful prophecy, so to speak, because everyone else is not hearing God's voice, just him. And after that successful record, they throw him in jail, they ignore him, they turn on him, they threaten him with violence, and of course, some of these proclamations, Jeremiah's doing, in the temple, and of course, that's I'm going to use this phrase, speaking truth to power to the temple authorities and to the government, and that's a good way to lose your head. In some cases, and so, and of course, go back to the group that decided to go to Egypt. It's like, oh, we'll do whatever God tells us, and it's like he prays for 10 days, gets an answer, and I totally ignore him, and so, but that's also use her word here, encouraging for me, for Jeremiah, is that he was still faithful despite the peer pressure, the jail time, even some of the weird things that God had him do as a sign and symbol. And I would. Okay, here's the history dork coming out of me a little bit. So when Jeremiah had the prophecy written down in the scroll and had the guy read it, and he's like, tie it to a stone and throw it in the river. One of the things I would be thinking if I received that prophecy, I'd be like, I want that. I need to verify what.
Yeah.
I want to keep notes. But hey, I'm gonna read it to you. I'm gonna chuck in the river. It's gone forever. Anyways.
All right.
But also, I think the common theme too. God's mercy as encouraging, eye opening. I think for me, when I keep thinking the eye opening, I think is throwing me off a little bit, but I think what for other people, especially when we'll talk about Lamentations here in a minute, is that I think some people tend to forget that God is a big boy and He's willing and He wants to hear from us, even when it's that raw emotion.
Even when you're mad,
even when you're mad. I think about that story where a lady gets a knock on her door. Her neighbor goes, "What is your son yelling about? Every time he comes home, I hear him screaming and shouting, and I'm all across the yard here." And he's like, "What is he doing?" The lady goes, "He's speaking to God." She's like, "How is that speaking to God?" He's like, "Well, he's had a tough time, and so he and God are trying to work. He's trying to work things out with God." I'm like, yeah. Some, and of course, with Habakkuk, God, how long?
Yeah.
We got to look upon injustice. Yep, God can handle, when we're feeling frustrated and scared and broken and hurt. So hopefully that's eye-opening for you guys too.
Yeah. All right, number 7. Probably going to say this wrong, but the book of Lamentations attributes Jerusalem's destruction to God, even though their sin was the cause, and He repeatedly warned them it would happen if they did not repent. Did you find God's actions hard to accept? Why or why not? And I said no. He did what every parent does, is he warns and warns and warns, and then when you finally have to take it away, that's called discipline, unfortunately. So I did not find it hard to accept because we live that every day. Well, just like I feel like our court system now. You're going to go to jail if you keep doing this. You're going to go to jail if you keep doing this. You're going to go to jail if you keep doing this. Well, all right, you're finally going. So it's kind of the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree. It was forthcoming and
prophesized.
consequences are always difficult to accept, but.
Well, I was just now thinking about it, and I really didn't have anything else I had to say until I realized when in their question, He repeatedly warned them. So think about the warnings that God gave. Some of them expand days, years,
centuries,
decades, and up to centuries. It's like, how much time is too much time? Mm-hmm. And if people want to say, God was harsh, if they've had centuries of warning to turn their hearts and minds back to God, I mean, think of it as a parent. How long do you extend that grace period to your kids? And
she gets about 30 minutes
until there's a consequence, until there has to be a punishment.
Sometimes 5 seconds. I count to 5 and go from there.
But that brings up another point for me. I mean, when you said that, because honestly, we don't ever quit nurturing or trying to raise our children, but there comes a time as adult children that they don't pay for their consequences anymore because we're not really responsible for their actions. Mm-hmm. But God continues to be responsible for our actions by disciplining, which I hadn't really thought about that. So he's beyond a parent
Yeah, but think about
what we
this
are.
as a parent with disciplining, but also think about a parent who bails their kid out of jail or pays the fine. Then it comes to our sin, God pays the cost to restore us back. And so that just goes, to how further how God just does not give up on us.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Number 8.
Ocho.
Even though Lamentations is filled with accusations against God, the author ends with praise and a request for God to draw near. What does the author seem to understand about God after all he's been through? What helps a person develop that kind of response and insight?
We kind of talked about this last week, and I think a couple weeks before, when we talked about kind of have to suffer for love. And I thought it was kind of full circle, because she kind of didn't say that exactly, but she kind of said you have to have hard times in your youth, and they want you to have how she put it. Yeah, bears, I think I put York, but that's not what doesn't make any sense. So, but pretty much, hopefully you do these things while you're young. You have hard times when you're young, so you can take that wisdom, is the way I took it, into your later life. Everyone has, this is going to sound weird, but Joe Rogan has a saying that your hardest time is your hardest times. It doesn't matter if it's just because your cat passed away is the hardest thing that you've ever gone through, or you were an orphan as a young child. Like, your hardest times are your hardest times. So, and that's what build us. Mm-hmm. And kind of just like God does, from what I took from it, is the author, which we assume is Jeremiah, was kind of thanking God for those hard times so that he could grow as what I would consider today a Christian. To understand, sometimes you have to go through a hard thing to completely understand why you went through that. And so, yeah, he's like, sorry for letting us know, pretty much to let us know what is important in life as well. So as a kid, did I really need that Xbox or PlayStation? No, I may have been mad at the moment, but whatever I got for Christmas instead, I probably used a lot more. And no, that's a bad acknowledge. I can't even say the word, but God kind of just gave what he needed. So
I answered with that I feel like the author understood that he was a just God, and yes, going back to whether Jeremiah, we assume he wrote that book. I think he knew he was a just God from everything that he had already asked him to do and then continued to do for them. But to develop that, I think you have to, the insight is that you had to have the respect for that person, the love, and the trust. He had to develop that with God in order to feel that way about him. To realize that he was a just God.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, I kept picturing Lamentations as a giant psalm. If you think about it, especially, the Psalms of David, where it is like, God, this is horrible. This sucks. What's going on here? Where you're at? And then all of a sudden get to the point where it's like, I'm going to praise your name, and I'm going to stand on the mountain, and woo, you are wonderful. And so that's where I saw Jeremiah in his wrestling with what's going on, is that he kind of, in the sense, is taking that same journey like David, just he wrote one really long psalm in his journey. And I think what helps a person, I think a lot of it is mindset. And so looking to God as the one who redeems, the one who fulfills promises, not trying to force something, an image on God, but to actually accept God for who He is and what He has done and what He's going to do. Because one of the things we know in psychology, and Amy probably correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that I've learned, that if you tell somebody or someone tells themselves that they're a victim, they're not going to escape that victim mentality. They have to be able to know that, yeah, I was victimized, but they do not have to live the life as a victim. That they do have strength that they can build, and that something happened to them that does not identify them. Yeah. And we are in a day and age where we take our identity from so many other things that are temporary or self-proclaimed, that it becomes at the expense, I would say, of our humanity. Because then we start judging and valuing people based on those subjective values that we've made. And so then we push people down or lift people up towards those. And so that's where mindset, and that's why Philippians is one of my favorite, because Paul's all about mindset. Have this mindset among you, like Christ Jesus, who gave, Philippians chapter 2 reference. And so I think just, again, refocusing our gaze, just like when you're driving through fog, you're getting through the fog. You're not staying in the fog, and your headlights are to pierce through so that you can see the road in front of you, maybe see the car in front of you, maybe see the sign that's going to get you out of that fog.
Yep. So, it's a great analogy.
I think I'll preach too. Sorry.
Yeah. Good preaching.
All right. It is our favorite question of the week because it's the only one that stays the same. And I'll start. I had day. Did I get there? 238.
So your bookmark's out.
I know. I noticed that when I just grabbed it. It's like normally it's set and ready to go. One of these times I'll get it. All right. Now, I just completely forgot how you said how to say that.
Lamentations.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 3, verse 32 to 33 points out the complexity of God's desire. Through he causes grief. He will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love. He does not afflict from his heart or grieve the children of men. Just like us, he can have desires that are in contrast to each other. But unlike us, none of his desires are sinful, and he always does what is right and best. He causes grief, but it is not his preference. But even more than he doesn't want to cause grief, he wants to produce obedience in his children, the children he loves. And he does that through discipline, which does cause grief sometimes. But his discipline, in conjunction with his compassion and steadfast love and the layers of his will, he always lands on what he serves the utmost glory and the greater joy of his kids. He's after his glory, he's after our joy, and he is where the joy is. As a father, this kind of just gave me like, it's okay to discipline almost. Like, in today's age, it's hard, how you discipline kids can get you a call from authorities. And just kind of, not that you're scared to, but you're scared to do certain things at certain places. So it kind of just gave me the ability to discipline, but to be just at the same time. Don't go overboard and go from there. So I'll try to take that away from that.
I chose day 237. What does it reveal to us about God that he gave this book to us? He's a God who can handle our feelings and frustrations and emotions, and who values them and invites us to engage with him on that level. Pour out your heart like water before the presence of the Lord. The author pours it out unguarded before the Lord, knowing God receives our emotions, even when they're the result of our sins. He wants us to talk with him about what we're feeling. We've seen all along how he's after our hearts. He doesn't just want one-dimensional, glossy love. He engages with the good, the bad, and the ugly in our hearts. How can he work with us on those levels if we keep the ugly emotions back from him? Who will speak truth to our struggles if we keep them in the dark? Throw some light on them. Talk to him about them. He'll meet you there in them. He's where the joy is. Again, this one just really speaks to me. And like I told you before, I was a little harsh on Johnny on the way up. And this is even in all relationships, because if we can't be honest, then how are we ever going to have a true relationship? And so I think it is okay to show God the good, the bad, and the ugly, because he wants to hear from us. And then I think sometimes even when we release that, we can sort it out, and then we can move on. So this one just really spoke to me.
Good deal. All right, I had 234. That's 234. I'm sorry. In book after book, God sends prophets to talk to his enemies, not just his people. Why does he spend so much time addressing others who aren't in his family? One of the purposes behind this is to display that God is sovereign over all nations and all people. In this day, nations attach themselves to specific gods and believe they're only accountable to the gods they attach themselves to, and vice versa. By talking to his enemies, Yahweh shows that he's a different kind of God than all the rest. He's sovereign over his people Israel, and he's sovereign over everyone everywhere, and everyone is accountable to him, whether they worship him or not. He's unique in this way, set apart from other gods. Our God is the universal God, sovereign over all those lesser gods, false gods, pagan gods, demon gods. They all answer to him, and they'll all bow to him. Not only is he the God of gods, but he's also your Father. Your Father is the sovereign God of all creation, and he loves you. He's where the joy is.
That's a good one.
It is a really good one, and the fact that, for me, that just what stood out is that he gives up on nobody. Yep, the others get consequences and whatnot too, but in essence, we see even with some of the graces he gives to some of the other nations in Jeremiah's prophecies, that's like, there's consequences, but I haven't given up on you. In fact, some of you are going to experience some blessing in what I'm doing as I'm arranging things for when the time is right, because again, we're moving closer and closer to when Jesus comes.
Yes.
Ooh, so exciting.
One day closer.
That's right. All right. Thank you guys very much for joining us. Let's get just totally blanked on sharing next week's reading. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We get into just the book of Ezekiel next week. So chapters 1 to 22. I'll admit I really love Isaiah, but Ezekiel, this has a weird special place because it is interesting. What God has Ezekiel do, I feel for the guy. And so I look forward to getting back into reading Ezekiel again and talking about it. So that's our only reading next week. Ezekiel chapters 1 to 22. And again, that's week 35. So 17 weeks.
Because we have not too many more books of the Old Testament, correct?
Correct. Because we still got a few of the minor prophets, but those are, of course, they're short ones. So I mean, when we get to them, we will cruise right through those as well.
Okay.
All right, then we get New Testament.
Yes.
Yay!
I'm ready.
All right, thank you again so much. That's Tyler. That's Queen Dawn. I'm Pastor Josh. See you next week. God bless.
Bye.